Let's turn to London now, where senior foreign correspondent Charlie D'Agata has the latest on what's happening across the pond, including the fast spread of that new coronavirus strain as the UK implements its strictest lockdown yet. Happy New Year's Eve, Charlie.
Happy New Year's Eve to you. Now, that strict lockdown means that people here have been told to celebrate New Year's Eve at home with their families. Because of this new surge, the new year looks a lot like the worst of the old year.
The nearly nationwide lockdown extension was expected, if dreaded nonetheless.
COVID loves a crowd, so please leave the parties for later in the year.
Here's why. The more contagious variant of the coronavirus is on the rampage, spreading far faster than at any time during the pandemic. Daily infections have risen to more than 50,000. Hospitals are already buckling under the highest rate of COVID patients ever seen. The stay-at-home order now impacts 3/4 of England. All non-essential shops, businesses, gyms, pubs, restaurants shut. Other European countries are taking drastic measures to contain rising infection rates, too. France will deploy 100,000 police to stop big crowds from gathering for New Year's Eve celebrations. Germany intends to extend its lockdown as that country records more than 1,000 deaths in one day for the first time. Hardest hit Britain may be offered a lifeline as the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine begins rollout next week.
The focus really now is on saving lives and enabling the healthcare system to get back to something approaching normal.
It will increasingly become a race between the vaccine and the virus. But not only did COVID have a head start, it's picking up speed.
I don't like hearing this, but obviously we've been talking about it for a few days. How is the coronavirus variant that's spreading there in the UK, how is it exactly impacting the country's latest lockdown? At the top, you said that people are being asked to stay at home and celebrate with their families, but are there other impacts?
Jamie, you know, you don't like hearing it. My parents don't like hearing it. I hate reporting it, but I have not seen anything like this. I started covering the coronavirus in Italy, and then obviously after it started entering Europe, I got back here, started covering. I've never seen anything like this in terms of the acceleration. And I know we just heard Dr. Anthony Fauci saying there's nothing to suggest that this is a more sort of severe variant of the virus. The numbers bear it out in terms of if you've got more people, considerably more people than ever that are testing positive for it. We now have hospitals that are overflowing, again, in numbers that we have never seen here in the UK. They're already at that point. And the scientific advisors to the government are saying, we haven't even had the Christmas surge yet because we're not even at that point. So the reason that this lockdown was put in place, and it's been here in London and around the southeast for more than a week, so-called Tier 4, which is made up. We only ever had Tier 3, then it went to Tier 4, and now it's expanded to 3/4 of the country. It's likely that it's going to be a nationwide lockdown, and this is a real lockdown. This isn't just, you know, the shops, this is the restaurants, the shops, businesses. People other than myself shouldn't be working today. People shouldn't be going to their offices, only essential workers. So you saw that graph. If it continued, even if you just took the past week, it starts going exponentially. And that's the reason for the lockdown. The big question now is one of the groups that has been transmitting this new version or this new variant of the virus have been young people, children, actually, between the ages of 10 and 14. Now they're trying to decide whether the kids who are still on Christmas break, they've extended it for another week in certain cases, in certain areas. But those elementary schools, secondary schools, they have to decide within the next few days whether they're going to try to homeschool them or whether they're going to try to keep them away from school to stop the spread of this virus. I mean, I hate to use the word unprecedented. Everybody uses it, but that is key to what's happening here.
Well, and it's really interesting, right? Because if it's impacting children, they've had a much better time fighting the virus. But as we know, as you're talking about, it then spreads to other family members and you get those huge surges at the hospital. So it seems that the lockdown is necessary. Charlie, I also want to talk to you about the fact that Britain has finally left the European Union. Prime Minister Boris Johnson signed the post-Brexit trade deal into law yesterday. How is this playing into the pandemic and the UK's response to it?
I mean, Jamie, for months, No, for years. Brexit has been the word. Up until COVID overtook Brexit, is all people were talking about. And, you know, to take it back a little bit without going into a big history lesson, we had former Prime Minister Theresa May, who had proposal after proposal going to Brussels and trying to hammer out this agreement, and it just never happened. It would get back to Westminster. It was profoundly rejected and sent back. Well, now we are literally, when I say not cliched, we are literally on the eve of Brexit. Interestingly, here in the UK, the eve of Brexit is at 11 o'clock because 11 o'clock is midnight in Europe. That just shows you who's dictating this party.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's not midnight here.
Interesting.
It's midnight in Europe. So when this agreement that was hammered out, that is something like 2,000 pages long, no way for lawmakers to go through all of that, it passed within a matter of hours. Why? Because we are in the middle of a pandemic. Because I think there's a fatigue here. Because it was a good enough deal. Good enough for now anyway. There are a lot of intricacies that need to be hammered out, negotiated over the coming weeks and months, but there needs to be a sense of cooperation. And certainly Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he sees it as a victory. But yesterday, you know, we're used to his floppy hair. We're used to him, you know, approaching the podium. And the guy, he looked exhausted because he was dealing with three different things. He had this great celebration about the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine, which will be a major tool, a powerful tool in the fight against COVID here in the UK, eventually in the United States, around the world for reasons I can't get into now unless you want to ask me. But he also had the lockdown, which people they're tired. And
Yes.
it's a real lockdown, and they want to see their friends and their family. And then at the end of it, he had Brexit. And he couldn't exactly do a victory lap in all of that because it's a sense of cooperation. It's not a victory. For the people who support Brexit, it's a great day. For the people who are against it, essentially half the country,
right,
it's a sad day. There is one very important thing to point out here. It's always been for the Brexiteers, it's always been about British sovereignty. And what the government has been amplifying is the fact that the UK government independently has been able to approve the Pfizer vaccine, first of all, before Europe. So it didn't need sort of permission from Europe to do that. That was always the case anyway. It has to do with the bylaws. But then with the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine, it's a time for Boris Johnson to sort of wave the flag. You know, the Oxford vaccine is a British vaccine. It will be given to the Brits first. The Pfizer vaccine was given to the Brits first, even before the Americans. So it's just an example, at least as the government sees it, as this British sovereignty away from the EU, making their own decisions and moving ahead of the people in Europe.
Seems like in London you have the ABCs, AstraZeneca, Brexit, COVID. What will 2021 bring? What's the D, Charlie?
You know, who knows? I honestly don't know what
it depends.
I shudder to think. It depends, yeah. No, but it has been. It's been an extraordinary 24 hours because if you took out the vaccine story, which is a massive story just in itself, and then you have the lockdown, and the reason we're reporting it, the reason Americans should look at what's happening in Britain is because you can look at the acceleration that's happening here with this new variant. You have to understand it's just a matter of time before that happens in the United States. And if you have that kind of acceleration, you're going to have similar lockdowns in the U.S. That's why it's relevant. But on a normal day,
Charlie,
if you took those away.
Happy New Year.
I know. Sorry about that. I hate reporting it, but it's on the way.
It's important information. Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much.
Thank you.